Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final Sunday Absolution with the 2MK team. I'm looking for people. I'm not seeing the people yet. But this specific arena that I've chosen to fight in does cause a bit of problems because it's so close to what you could consider to be a zone line. And I'm not entirely sure where I got my group members off to. In our last stream, we went through some battles around this big open area. Very easy to understand for the most part. And while you'll drift a bit, there's no actual direct danger, particularly of falling off the edges, because there's no edges to fall off of. And while getting stuck in corners in this game is still a thing and does matter, you don't care as much. However, this area, I believe I did allude to on our last stream of this content, does have a nice cliff you can fall off of if you fight incorrectly. But depending on how you do it, it will try to load the next area sometimes. So it may take a little bit longer to get everyone together, particularly because the thing I use to make the, let's call it lounge, inviting 3 people, does not necessarily work as easily if I have to run all the way over there for it every time. So I'm going to see if they can manage to get here on their own for the time being, and if they do, whether or not I end up in the same instance as them, or if I need to run back and forth a little bit. Which is relatively easy to do anyway, so. As this is our final Absolver content intended, there's not going to be as much focus on anything else. If you find that the game is interesting, you can just check back on our YouTube channel for any other notable things you want to check on or understand. For today, we are mostly just fighting. But it's beginning to look like I actually have to go gather everyone together, making this take even longer. Oh, no, there's one. So some running back and forth may have been enough. In the meantime, therefore, while I wait for a signal that they have found me, I will go through the very, very basics of this game. And I will do it in a burst of information that is usually pretty easy to understand for people who have played fighting games before, particularly Street Fighter style games. Main thing you need to understand is I control my character's move options. Not just what I press, what I do at all. There is a stance, therefore, from which this is an attack that I do, and I control the stance, therefore I hit, in my case, R2, and I get these attacks. If I'm in my front stance, I'll get this one. Low back stance, get this one. And a different back stance gives me this one. Damage is available, as you can see here. These damage numbers don't mean anything because the one you're seeing is my overall average damage. Here's the actual damage of this knee attack. 114 based on power strikes. Here's the speed, the range, and frame data. This game does not follow the very standard rules of being on hit or block. The stamina cost and other things are related to how much it will cost you to do and how much stamina your opponent will lose if they block it and don't use their standard defensive ability. I could change this so that in the same position I will, instead of doing this knee, do this uppercut. And you can see nicely on the side there it will tell you what will change. I will get longer startup but more advantage on hit, less advantage on block. So you have to build your own style completely and be very clear about what everything is for you personally. So if you're good at these games and enjoy building concepts like that, it's usually fairly interesting. And poof, people have appeared. I'll let them begin, because this is most interesting when these two are fighting. With the capacity to fall off the edge added to their usual long-range spacing and positioning styles of combat, there's a lot more focus here on spending time repositioning instead of necessarily putting your next attack out. And similarly, if you've managed to put your opponent at a disadvantage, then you have a lot of good reason to use that to get to the part of the stage that isn't, you know, with your back to a cliff. Similarly, you could be the sort of person who realizes it's fine to not do that. My style is so offensive, my style is so pushing forward that I don't care. I'll just not worry about this. I can win the match without this happening. Of course, you could win the match faster if you manage to knock your opponent off a cliff. But if you're winning anyway and your opponent is thinking about this, thinking that they have advantage in some way, you can use this to strike through their defenses more often. A common thing you'll find in even other styles of game, because people spend more time thinking about, should I corner my opponent or should I go for damage, in games that make you choose between one or the other mostly. While this can cause certain types of matches to drag out, for these two it's not so much. In fact, it's technically more so that it's making it quicker, I'd say. That, I would say, was probably a bait. And a bait related to perception of meter. You can't directly see your opponent's meter in this game, but obviously you have some idea of how much meter they've got based on when was the last time they used it. But I'll have to fight myself to make the meter thing completely clear without making you go back to watch one of our previous videos just to understand it. So I'll talk about that more when I am fighting. Currently, this is 2-0 to OmniRabbit. And that is very close, but not close enough. Okay then. This place is also better for staying out of the way, but I'm expecting she's going to fall off if she stays there. Either way, go around and misspace that. But here's some meter to talk about. Too early on the feint, but still got. The meter can be viewed through the glowing shards on my character's hip. Using attacks will build it a little bit. Defending correctly will build it quite a lot. And where by correctly I mean using your special ability. In my case, being able to sidestep things correctly when my opponent makes a specific strike. But taking hits also matters. I should have backdashed. I'm the type to ignore the whole getting close to the ring out situation. Did I switch those buttons up? I don't remember switching them up. Too slow. And I keep on forgetting he has that move now. But I'm still ahead a little bit, I think. And outspaced. But only at the very end. Did she disappear? She disappeared somewhere. Oh no, there she is. That was not the move I expected there. But that's my fault, obviously. This time I got caught while attempting to backdash. Got the range right. We're finished. Once again got caught on the backdash. That's a lot of meter. Certainly more than I expected her to have. But now I can obviously assume my opponent doesn't have as much meter, so I can do different things. Needed to feint that one. needed to feint that again. I'm mistiming that now. And was in the wrong stance. But my opponent managed to read through nearly every time I did that. And I think that means that it's still one more match to go. Ah, I was actually not expecting that kick to kill, and therefore go for the combo. We started a little late, but I'm not necessarily sure we're continuing that much longer as a result of it. I never expect that sweet when it comes. No counterattack. I mean, I was going to attempt to dodge it anyway. But I guess that level of awareness that my opponent has to know that I'm going to dodge it is important. I probably could have finished that one. Insufficient armor. But against a cornered opponent who cannot backdash, honestly I shouldn't have gone for the sweep, actually. I'm much better at corners than I am at pushing off, so you're not going to get a whole lot of the actual people falling off of stuff in this stream. But it's still here as an option, and the fact that we have to keep on thinking about it, even a little bit, matters a lot. Should have gone for the full liver knee. But realizing that I didn't go for it and that my opponent's thoughts are therefore on the fact that I didn't go for it before means that I could finish the move and leave my opponent on the defensive, wondering whether or not it was going to work. And I've lost track, but I'm going to assume I won, because I'm getting no specific response here. And circle. Yeah, I get this advantage because I have less health. That's my reasoning right now. Oh no, the tables have turned. In a harsher match, my opponent would obviously immediately attack again, but in a quote-unquote harsher match, we wouldn't be fighting here. There is, however, an arena in the standard game mode where you do have to worry about being flung off the end. And it's about the same distance, I think. Needed a better chase than that. Now, why you might ask why I did that? The spacing was bad. I know this player is spacing really well relative to my own, because I fight her a lot, in other games too, and because we built the characters to be so similar to our characters in other games, I can immediately recognize I have made a mistake here, my spacing is bad, I need to use the shockwave metered option to push her away from me before I end up under pressure, basically being countered. This situation, on the other hand, is one where even if I have the disadvantage, the thing I want to do is this with the meter. Because she can't respond as quickly or as much if she has to keep on using up her own energy, and therefore, at the worst, it'll cause her to use her own meter in the same space. That was execution errors on my part entirely, but it was execution errors and my opponent recognizing that I was under enough pressure due to the exact same spacing issue to have to deal with them. Right now, we're interacting on the level of me trying to land a straight kick and my opponent evading it. The reason this is useful for me is because, one, that kick tracks a little bit, and secondly because I am technically on the side of the arena where causing her to keep on backdashing in order to deal with it is a positive to me. But again, I keep on getting caught in the bad spacings, and since I miss time, I think there's one more. Looks like it. If I miss timing the use of the shockwave, then I'm still in those bad spacings. But if my mind is now on the shockwave part, I might not have recognized the string my opponent intended to use, and therefore don't have my defenses ready in mind. This game is, of course, also about mix-ups. I think that she won? It's a good enough match that I should assume that she won, because I don't remember. But it definitely felt like she won, so onward! These two have much less situations where one person is absolutely advantaged by spacing and the other one is not. They don't necessarily have a lot of pressure-based interactions either, but they do exist. They exist particularly when one person goes for a move and the other fails the whiff punish. They don't recognize that they need to do it, they weren't mentally ready for doing it. Something happens that move A, which is not even intended to hit, it might check an approach, but it isn't really being done for the purpose of landing the strike. And you weren't ready with either an interrupt or a whiff punish for that move. Because often, with their styles, the next move in the chain is fairly advantageous, or at least can be confusing enough that you have to care. You'll find that much more often if someone has happened to do a move that was specifically intended to check the opponent and not to set up that situation, they'll backdash more. Which is why you end up seeing so many more backdashes in their matches. It's fishing for a hit and then realizing, nope, my opponent's response was entirely opposite of what I expected. So instead of continuing my assault and just being really predictable, I'm going to backdash out of this because I never approached close enough to be in real danger. If you approach close enough to be in real danger, you were going to get whiff punished anyway, so it didn't matter. That, for example, was just being at a bad spacing. Not a terrible one, because Rune Siren does have counters to that. As just shown, she can get around certain things using just the Windfall defense. And since Omni would need to keep on using moves that advance, it's a little bit clearer what needs to be done. But if you mistime those defenses, or defend incorrectly relative to where Omni is in the string because you didn't recognize where he was, then you will still get hit, and basically your failing defense can be pummelled to death. Gotta learn to react to that sweep eventually. Sadly, we don't play this game often enough to learn to react to raw sweep in neutral. I'm not actually sure it would help all that much either. Blocking it would certainly be good, but in general, the game does not have a throw, meaning that you gain advantage by forcing your opponent to block so long without them actually having even a chance of using their defensive ability. Stamina is depleted by blocking, and rush down style characters will usually build their stats towards rush down, namely that they can continue attacking for longer periods. Similarly, you could use this for defense, but overall, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that a rush down character do so, because if you are using that for defense, it means that you're often in a state where if you built for rush down, you can't actually keep going because you had too much energy used up on your defense to actually counterattack strongly. Good counter choice. Oof, I telegraphed that so hard. I telegraphed the other two, but at least I got away with it. We've been steadily improving at this game, but again, this is the last time we're likely to have this content, unless, like, DNF randomly has maintenance. I could not decide whether or not to backdash that or to sidestep that, and I ended up pressing both buttons at once, and I don't even know what happened. That is not what I wanted my guard brick to be on. And out of energy. Good practice for Street Fighter 6, I guess, sort of. Ooh, that was a good plan, because that pushed me further toward the corner in a way that I'm not used to having to deal with. Meaning I didn't have the backdash position I normally use. And that was just a check, because, again, that was telegraphed. I should have used a different option, but the move that I have that goes in front of that option is much more telegraphed, and I would just be whiff punished instead. Baited parries, still did not make it through. I'm back in the same position, and my opponent uses the same option, because it's the correct option. You can tell I like flying moves. But mainly, I like them because they are good tracking. They're a good way to keep pressure up on an opponent who will try to get out of pressure by more so evading it than blocking. They spend a lot of time in the air, but you are using these precisely because you expect that the opponent will not counter them. They will be trying to get out of the way, and as a result, they will not be able to counter them. Pressure strings. Yes, I had to watch my meter that entire time. But I made it! I think that means I won. Based on the lack of response, I'm assuming I won. When it's intense enough, I do tend to lose track of the round counter. And the game does have enough of a fighting game bent that you actually have a mode where you are, in fact, doing this. Like, in a specific arena against people who are randomly online. And you will have an actual first to three setup specifically in arenas. You can find lots of YouTube on this if you find it interesting. Whereas our content tends to be more about just explaining games, teaching people how to play them if they care. But you can definitely see lots of really great matches by just going on YouTube and searching Absolver matches. I should have fainted that too. And that is the punish I should always be hit with when I'm doing that. The difficult part of it is that my opponent does this by feinting a stance and changing the stance when they see me move. I'm not sure that's what happened just now, but I've gotten so used to that happening that I stopped looking for what her stance is. It does not help me understand anything. I deserve that. That was the worst overcommit so far today. Fortunately, I think I managed to, still managed to bait it. She knows that I have enough meter to reduce her stamina regain, which is what my purple meter option does. Meaning that at the end of certain things, it makes much more sense to push me off and make sure that I'm not going to manage a guard break. Unfortunately for me, this implies sitting on a lot of meter for a really long time. Ended up in the wrong stance though. Mostly for us, we've been practicing this to get good enough to just be able to, instead of having to fight each other as much, we could now probably, after a couple of weeks of practice, go into standard matches. We'd probably lose to the people who really have a lot of time to play this game. But it'd be losing in a way that you're not really fighting against your own inputs anymore, or your forgotten misunderstandings. I think that's my opponent winning. And if not, So while waiting for DNF Duel to be released, we decided to catch back up on Absolver with at least some basic weekly practice. Kinda helps when you at least remember all your normals. And in some cases, strategies. If you plan to play this game online, or are reminded that you wanted to try to play this game online, do remember that fighting game players, because this is still a fighting game players are not always the most conducive to learning. And yes, there are absolutely strategies and builds in this game where the main plan is to make you unable to do anything, or to constantly test your reactions in a very specific and difficult way. This is no different. No matter how flashy the game looks, and no matter how fluid it looks with like those cool YouTube videos, those are very high level players, or people who are specifically aiming to be very high level players in a specific way that leads to them playing differently. So this is a little false advertising, you could say, that you're watching here. But only in the sense that most fighting games are. They're really cool and really hype at the top levels when you absolutely understand and can do all the reactions required to beat the first order strategies. But it's not necessarily going to be like that, so don't assume that unless you're going to jump into it with a friend or two, that you'll necessarily have all that great an experience. There are absolutely people who will either dash away from you and use lunging moves over and over and over until you maybe manage to block or parry one correctly. And there's another set of people who will just use the fastest pressure string they can find with as many mix-ups in it as possible, so you literally can't defend, and they're just counting on your character not having enough stamina to avoid being guard broken. Both of these things are defeatable, but they're about as fun as... If either of those things sounds fun to you as something to go up against, either because you're the sort of person who will do the exact same things and just enjoy having the matchup be about that, or you just enjoy overcoming that type of executional challenge, then you're more likely to enjoy playing Absolver online as a whole. Do note, of course, that you do still probably need to build your style from scratch and get all of the moves you would want, particularly if you're familiar with other fighting games and want specific styles of move. The game will start you with a base thing that goes with your defensive option, your windfall style or whatever else, but when you want to do your customization, you do have to fight a lot of NPCs. This is a good start off and you will get used to the game this way, but it can definitely be slow. So recognize that you can't necessarily just jump in either. You will not necessarily have all of the options you would want to use for the game itself. Yeah, I think we're probably not going on longer than usual. We did release our Iori bot for KOF 15 today, and that delayed the stream a little bit. But that does not necessarily mean it's worth going for more. That's a different move somehow. I really thought all this time that that move was the same as mine, but I did get, like, XP for blocking it correctly. So, apparently it isn't. I did not expect that to work, but saw my opponent moving at the last moment and decided, I'm not cancelling this, I'm going to see what happens. And it turned out in my favour, so I'm thankful. The little height difference here is not really a big deal compared to before. You might think it makes as much difference as it did on our on-tilt stream, but it really doesn't. I shouldn't have gone for that the second time. If you would like to figure out how to optimize your deck, your set of moves, there are also videos nearly everywhere that will tell you not just play my way, do this thing, but will actually give you a decent explanation in full of how to do it. And this is probably not the level of content that I am able to give help with directly. Because it depends on things such as control schema and your basic style and understanding of fighting games themselves. Like, it depends on which game you came from. I don't think that was actually a parry. but it might have been. I did that too early. It still worked out because I fainted out a thing. Here we go again. See, at that point, when I've hit my opponent with the stamina depletion, I'm no longer thinking about the dangers of them attacking me. If the situation isn't in my favor, I will just block. Ah. I delayed myself. The lack of recovery will therefore make it complicated. I think it's still one more. Pretty sure it's still one more. And if not, so what? Last stream is not really the time to be paying too much attention here. Ooh! Yeah, I feel like that was one more because I was remembering that I was at disadvantage and therefore it was Omni's win that was supposed to happen, right? Either way, we're almost to the end of the stream as planned, and I'm being engaged, so let's fight more. They'll probably have one more match with them on stream. Assuming I don't win this one. I reacted to the move, but the move itself wasn't even in range of me. Which is a weird feeling to have. Alright then. Final match of the night, I believe. Generally, it's not going to be so easy to find us in here as we normally do. Because not only do we not play this game on a set time, it's not exactly a game that a lot of people play as far as I know anymore. You can see them and you'll definitely get them if you jump into the main mode, but if you don't, you're probably at the point where you're needing to learn moves anyway, so you don't care. I didn't know what to do there. Okay, that worked. Don't I have that move too? Very confusing. Honestly, it's possible I don't have that move. But I don't think I needed it. I think, for me, I'm finally done. I have everything where it's supposed to be. But I can't be absolutely sure of that, because some options, like, again, if your aim is to deal with people who are using the absolute first order strategies, or the most annoying ones, there's not actually that much overlap between those two things. The best strategies are not often the most annoying strategies, which is usually good because games die much too fast if that's true. And I think this one survived pretty long before people even started to wane in their general interest. Therefore, yeah, I think my deck is done. I think all my moves are the way they're supposed to be. I certainly don't have any recollection of things I was supposed to be doing. It made more sense to go for the sweep again because the thing I was getting hit by doesn't go in that space. So I made the bet, as always. Oof! That is the worst time to get caught in that, because that would have happened regardless of if I feinted the move or not. I have not managed the execution for that in so long. I think this is now the final round, and if it isn't, I declare it to be. You can find all of our bots for our other games, and of course, our new KOF, i.e. KOF 15 bots, on our website 2-mk.org. We have just released the Iori bot today to help you out with the basics, so you can head on into that. And if you got here via our Twitter, great, and if not, you can figure out what we are streaming at 7:30 Eastern Time on most, if not all, weekdays by checking our Twitter 2_MK_FGC. If you don't see a tweet by around 7:45 Eastern, usually means that we're not streaming that day. Sometimes we let you know, sometimes we're not able to. But as this is the last stream of this type, DNF Duel will be released in the upcoming week, and unless they are having maintenance at precisely this time next Sunday, you can expect to see that content instead. This has been Rillian, 142MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.